Charlotte. You're watching The Ugly Atheist. I'm recording this episode in the morning as opposed to the afternoon because it's Easter today. Happy Easter to everybody! And wanted to. I'm not going to have time in the afternoon to record, so I'm doing it this morning. We are now back to our regularly scheduled programming. I know last week was a bit of a departure. I did a piano improv because on this channel is kind of like just a collection of thoughts and whims, I guess. If you read the description, I mention a bunch of different genres of information, um, from politics to philosophy to religion and music. Kind of a hodgepodge. I should probably really do a separate channel for some of these. I do have another channel called Flitter. Maybe I'll post some stuff on there. I also wanted to try some ASMR stuff. So maybe Flitter should be my kind of catch all channel. In today's episode, I wanted to discuss a book I just finished reading. And I have no idea what drew me to this book, except for the cover looked kind of interesting. It's a book by Emma Donoghue. Let's see if I can get this on here. It's called Haven. And I wanted to let me read you the synopsis really quick that's found on the inside cover here. Three men vow to leave the world behind. They set out in a small boat for an extraordinary island their leader has seen in a dream. With only faith to guide them, in 7th century Ireland, a scholar and a priest called Art, who's a monk, these are all monks, Catholic monks in Ireland. Art has a dream telling him to leave the sinful world behind. Taking two monks, young Trian and old Cormac, he rows down the river Shannon in search of an isolated spot in which to found a monastery. Drifting out into the Atlantic, the three men find the island now known as Skellig Michael, an impossibly steep, bare rock inhabited by tens of thousands of birds, and claim it for God. In such a place, what will survival mean? That um, what struck me about that and about this book was essentially this very unusual idea. It's not, it's the idea of going out into the unknown and establishing something greater than yourself, something larger than yourself that will outlast yourself. And I find this often among guys where there is sort of a calling or a draw to go out into the wilderness with virtually nothing. In this book, for example, the monks are getting their boat ready for this journey into the unknown. They have no idea where God is going to be taking them. Um, and they're packing things that they think that are essential for the trip. But this high priest, he's not high priest, he's just a monk scholar he's an educated monk. He keeps saying, no, we don't need that. No, we don't need that. So they end up only taking just hardly anything at all. But what occupies most of the space are these holy ritualistic things like, the the bread and wine for communion, and the like crosses and things, ceremonial things for when they land on the place where God has led them. They will at least be able to worship. Like that's the priority for this priest. And he has the other two, Trian and Cormac, swear allegiance to him, swear loyalty or obedience, I should say, to him. And after they take their vows, or do their vows, they set off, and the whole trip, this character Art, who wishes to be referred to as the prior, which he is the leader among equals, as he puts it. Um, he keeps saying, like when Cormac and Trian would bring up some reasonable course of action, like why don't we do this and this so that this and this won't happen? And Art would always come back with, "Oh, you have little faith, trust God." And I find this is kind of scary in one sense, where you're going into the unknown willingly with nothing. And as I mentioned earlier, this is something I see a lot among guys, where they'll be compelled to go, camping, or go on these long, you know, excursions into the wilderness with just a backpack, with just minimal provisions. I don't know if it's something just to kind of prove to themselves. Maybe it's some kind of thing that demonstrates manhood, or um, is it part of the human compulsion to bring order into chaos, to command your surroundings, to take wilderness and make it habitable? Um, I think there's some deeper psychological and evolutionary things at work here. But the thing that was driving, the underlying tone that was driving art into um, going on this journey, first of all, was a dream. He felt it was a dream from God, and in his dream, he actually saw the two, Trian and Cormac, as the people that God has chosen for him to take on this journey. But his underlying premise for this trip, or his motivation, was in search of purity. He felt like the world was too corrupt, and it was compromising his ability to commune with God. So he felt that God was leading him to find some place where there were no people, so that he can focus on his devoutness and dedication to God, without temptation, without um, corruption from his fellow man. When they finally find this huge rock sticking out of the ocean, it's that becomes the monastery that he wants to found with these two guys. And the the two lesser monks are trying to talk some sense into Art, saying, hey, let's build a shelter. We need to, find out where we're going to get water and food. But Art kept saying, hey, God will provide, have faith, and he starts to actually get mad at these two for not having enough faith. And he brings them, makes them feel shameful for doubting. um, and that when the two lesser monks suggest, hey, we can use the boat to go barter with these neighboring islands to get the things we need. And Art says very coldly and soberingly, you know, we're not leaving this island ever. We're not going to go intermingle with other people. This is going to be our monastery forever. And to me, that's just horrifying. It kind of reminded me of when I did that episode on Buddhism, and learned about that Chinese Buddhist practice of self mummification, where you're just so focused on your own purity and your own enlightenment, that you isolate yourself from other humans. And to me, this seems to fly in the face of Christianity at its core, where Christ asks us to go make disciples of every nation. But if you're too overly focused on your own purity and your own sanctification, and you permanently isolate yourself from the rest of the world, you are not fulfilling that commandment. I think you're doing a disservice to humanity. So I feel like the quest for purity is, of course, an amazing thing to strive for. But if it removes you from the human population, if you are, I think you are in error. You're not, any wisdom that you learn or that you glean is for self only, essentially. Like, you can't even share that with the rest of the world. As a side note, I kind of looked up this author. I looked her up after I started reading the book, and it turns out she's kind of what they call a third wave feminist, which I don't know if I necessarily wholly agree with that philosophy. Um, so I kind of had a hunch that at some point in this book, she's going to bring up some kind of social issue, because nobody who holds such uh, a controversial view is just going to write a book about a historical event or something. They're going to try to introduce some kind of agenda or message that furthers their agenda. And sure enough, at the end, it turns out that one of the lesser monks was like a eunuch or something, and Art is appalled, and uh, he wants to isolate. It was the younger monk Trian who turned out to be, I guess, I don't know if it was a hermaphrodite or something, but he, um, the lead monk Art, wanted to excommunicate this person, calling them a freak and so on. Um, and then Cormac kind of comes to his senses and realizes that Art is a lunatic, and he's overly obsessed with this purification and the dogmatism and fundamentalism of being a monk, not even of Christianity, but of just being um, a monk whose utmost goal is purity. Um, so he and Trian end up at the end of the book leaving the island. Spoiler alert. I think between all of them, the older monk Cormac probably demonstrates the Christian ethos the most genuinely, where he's more concerned about the well-being of humanity and not so much of self. Um, I think it needs to be a balance where you do need to have those moments of isolation where you seek purity and understand your motives and um, come to terms with what your shortcomings and how to overcome them. And but at the same time, as I mentioned, you can't isolate yourself from the rest of the suffering in the world. You need to immerse yourself in alleviating suffering and bringing the good news, as it were, to the world, no matter what your religion is. So I guess I don't know that I will read any other books from Emma Donoghue. If you get a chance to read this, it's just interesting this from a survivalist aspect, like what how they're able to manage on this rocky island where there was no water. They had to build a cistern to catch rainwater. They had to um, figure out how to use go fishing with minimal instruments and catch birds. So it's kind of interesting from that aspect too. It's just kind of scary to me to go into the unknown like that, and with nothing but your faith, thinking that God's going to provide. And in this case, they lucked out where a lot of things just kind of happened for them, which I can see how a person of faith can easily conclude that that must mean that God is watching out for them, but that ignores all the thousands of other cases with a similar scenario where it doesn't work out for people. And you can say, oh, well, they just didn't have enough faith, but that's kind of a cheap shot. I just wanted to go over that book and my thoughts on that. If you have any comments on that, please leave them below. I know there aren't very many people who watch these videos, but anyway, I persist. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'm Charlotte. If you're watching The Ugly Atheist, if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. And we'll see you next week.